You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Andrew Menter. He's an entrepreneur renowned for his resilience, innovation, and transformative impact on the fitness industry. He was born in South Africa and raised in Dallas, and he began his athletic journey with tennis, including a Texas state championship and national ranking, led him to tennis scholarships at Brown University. He competed in college, and including 4 Ironman events. That's pretty crazy. A lot of physical crazy stuff as he's gone. Now, it looks like he's founded a company called Physmodo, and the goal, they state, is to use computer vision to quantify human movement very, very quickly. I don't know if it's for to determine that someone is, who someone says they are, or if it's for sports, but we'll find out. But regardless, welcome, Andrew. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Richard. It's really a pleasure to be on.
Well, very good. Tell me a bit about your background in sports and how that led to Physmodo, and what's the purpose of Physmodo?
Well, you mentioned, the Ironmans, and that may sound impressive, but it's caused some long-term, I wouldn't say damage, but some concerns on the way I'm moving. It's led to a number of injuries, and really the big moment for me ahead of starting Physmodo was I had someone do a movement assessment on me, and it took about 15 minutes and was really accurate in pointing out where, I had some limited mobility, some asymmetry issues. I loved it, but I never had one done again because it took 15 minutes. And so the impetus behind Physmodo was, hey, can we do something similar to this, but do it in 30 seconds? And so that's what we've done. We've used computer vision, so we can do this on your iPad, mobile device, Android, iOS, it doesn't matter. And in 30 seconds, you can look at your mobility, stability, your posture, your symmetry, show you where you may have some movement challenges, and then give you corrective exercises to improve them.
I mean, being an athlete, though, why wouldn't you, what was wrong with 15 minutes? That seems like a small price to pay to analyze your movement, and maybe it contributes to the mystery of the whole thing. It's not like a 2-second process, and, it's calculating, and it's just doing this and that to be specific to you.
100%. Well, let's think about this. We have a lot of people that are using wearables these days and measuring their sleep. So let's imagine that you're measuring your sleep once every 3 months. That is not useful information because there are too many variables that go into how you sleep from one night to the next. And it's the same with movement, because if I've been in a car for 5 hours, if I've been on a flight, if I've had a heavy workout, my movement is going to be different today than it may be on another day where I've, let's say, just done a yoga workout. So we need to be able to do multiple movements and really do as often a check-in as possible. And the 50-minute one was great, but that's not practical to be doing on a frequent basis. And I believe just like you need to test your sleep or look at your sleep, your HRV, whatever it may be, frequently, same with movement.
I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. Like blood sugar. Who wants to stick their finger every 2 hours or after you eat? When you have a continuous glucose monitor, you can see, second by second what's going on. It gives you a much better picture. So that makes total sense.
Yeah, and the statistic that really astounds people is that the cost of musculoskeletal healthcare exceeds that of metabolic. And yet we're doing all of these tests, preventive tests, to try and, understand what interventions we can have if there are poor markers somewhere. So, we look at, you name it, a lipid panel. If it's bad, we do something about it. If your vitamin D is low, we can do something about it. But wait a minute, the greatest spend is on musculoskeletal. Well, what's the lipid panel vitamin D equivalent for movement? And there isn't anything. And that's because a lot of them take 15 minutes. So we're saying, let's get some marker of how you're moving. Let's, for instance, understand, okay, you have poor hip mobility. We're understanding that in 30 seconds. Poor hip mobility is very likely going to lead to a back injury. So we need to see measurements across the board so we can have interventions. just like we do for everything else.
When is it useful to observe someone? Like, let's say I'm playing soccer. Should I have this system, like you have separate systems for each player and you're observing them during each play or between each play? Well, let's say actually football, sorry, because that's more stop-start. It seems like after each play, if you're assessing each player, you can say, oh, so-and-so is walking funny and they must have got a hit wrong. So-and-so, maybe we gotta call a timeout. I can see that so-and-so is now limping or whatever it may be. Like, when is it most useful and how?
Well, we're not tracking player movement throughout a game or sport or anything. It's funny you mentioned soccer too. I tore my left Achilles playing soccer. Now, it's a good example because what we're not looking. I know we said we'll switch to football. Let's go back to soccer for a second since I have this specific example. But there was a reason that I tore my left Achilles, and that's because I had asymmetry on my left side. Now, this was before Physmodo and before I knew about movement assessments. If I knew that I had poor asymmetry and I was favoring my left side, I could do something about that, and I wouldn't even have gotten on that soccer field in the first place because I knew I had a higher propensity to get injured. Now, the number one cause for injury is previous injury, which we can't do anything about. However, the number two cause of injury is asymmetry. And that is
skeletal balance.
Yeah, it led. So I have had, and a lot of this is due to, Ironman and the tennis and I did a lot of CrossFit, but I have a left Achilles tear. I have a left torn meniscus. I have a labral tear in my shoulder on the left side. I ruptured my left bicep tendon. That is not a coincidence. Asymmetry is critical to look at. If we're going to reduce injuries, that is a huge marker to look at.
When people train, unless they're really aware of it, they might magnify the asymmetry. And then you have handedness, which I don't know how much that contributes to asymmetry. Probably, I would guess, quite a bit. Maybe nerve innervation on if you're right-handed on your right side is just more, and therefore you can articulate your body in a better way to respond to like playing stresses than your left. I don't know. Like, how do handedness and just natural asymmetry come into play?
Well, and I think like you said, there's in certain industries or certain sports where you're naturally going to be using one side more than another. And what we're seeing, so we work with special ops, and some of the biggest and strongest people, but their movement is very compromised in many cases. But there's an ability to, just by virtue of the strength, to compensate to accomplish their task, notwithstanding these movement issues. But the more and more you do that, ultimately you're going to pay the price. And so, some people think, well, you see the biggest, strongest person and that person is going to move the best. And we typically see, no, that's not the case.
When is your product used or when are you called in? Because again, let's say someone's going to play a sport. They're a freshman. They're going to try to get onto this team, whatever it may be. Everyone, I would think, again, without specific attention to it, is going to naturally have asymmetry. People's foot sizes are different, and there's everything, very few people are symmetrical. Do you first use it to find that and train that out of somebody so they're as symmetrical as possible, and then they advance in a more healthy way into the higher levels of sportsmanship? Is that one use?
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, when I had my Achilles tear, in the recovery, I was working on my left side, and I was able to, in doing these squats, see my ankle, my dorsiflexion, my ankle flexibility. And I needed to understand, when do I get to start training again? Well, I need to make sure that my rehab is far enough along that symmetry on the left ankle is the same as that on the right ankle. So the deficient side, ankle, knee, shoulder, whatever it may be, the way you get it more symmetrical is you're just working more on that side. And the importance, again, of coming back to this 30-second screen is you can quickly retest. So we're trying to let's give a common one. We are measuring your squat depth. So the ideal number to get to is you want to get 90 degrees. So your quads, your thighs are parallel to the ground, but you don't want one going 90 and one going 82. So if the one side is going at 82, we need to work on that so that it's getting closer to 90. Otherwise, again, you're going to favor that one side. And again, number 2 leading cause of injury.
I can feel it now. I jumped into a pool about a month ago and landed really hard and crunched my knees. My right one, I really messed up and it's been healing, but I still can't straighten it all the way and I can't walk. I'm walking with a limp right now. And as soon as possible, I want to be able to not only walk straight, but make sure that any atrophy from it not being used as much is overcome and I get back into balance. So makes total sense.
Yeah, and so let's just say I'm sorry that happened. That's no fun. Beforehand, let's say you had a score including your knee flexibility. Well, you would know what that baseline is, and we score from a 0 to 100. Let's just say your knee flexibility on that one side, you were getting a 7. Well, now you can test and you're, getting a 40, 50, you name it, something a lot less than that 70. So whether you're trying to rehab yourself or working with a chiropractor or working with a physical therapist, you now know your baseline. You know your physio can give you the corrective protocols or maybe you can yourself, but you know that you are not back to baseline until you get to 70. And, again, underscoring, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time testing that knee every day. You're not going to spend 15 minutes testing, but you'll spend 30 seconds. And that's why we believe it's important on every joint, not every joint, shoulder, hips, knees, ankles, even just those, a baseline for where you are. Because look, you could be perfectly healthy. We work with sports teams. We work with some of the top athletes that are working. We have a contract with Under Armour that's working with some of the top athletes in the UK, and they just want to know their baseline because if something's off one day before training, they're going to adjust their training. We're also working on the rehab side because, the goal is to get, in your case, your knee back to where it was. And there's got to be some objective way versus, hey, Richard, how are you feeling? Do you think that knee's back to where it was? Yeah, I think so. Yes or no? Well, no, we want to get that down to a science. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So how do you use like a smartphone to self-assess, or you have to use your laptop or special cameras, or?
Yeah, so right now, we have 2 versions. We have one that's an enterprise app that is in a facility. So you may be familiar with Stretch Lab. There's over 500 in the country. And so in every single Stretch Lab, wall-mounted iPad. On the consumer side, you can use your cell phone, and that's on an iPhone or an Android device. So you can do it when you're with someone in a facility, gym, chiropractor, or remotely just by yourself. You prop up the phone. There's a bubble leveler on the bottom right, so you're having it level and getting accurate scores, and it's the ability to screen in person or remotely. And then I guess the core of the question then is, this is somewhat technical. So on the phone, you have let's just take the iPhone. You have the LiDAR camera on the back. It's a 3D camera. The problem is you cannot self-screen if you are looking at the back of your phone, because we are giving you instructions of where to stand and what to do in order to do this screen. So we need to use the front camera. The problem with the front camera, the challenge, is that it is not a 3D. That's it's facial recognition primarily. So it's a 2D, meaning we're only getting one of the 3 planes of motion, but we're able to get a patent so that we're looking at that 2D camera and effectively getting all 3 planes of motion. So that 2D camera is looking at your body. It's picking up all of your joints, your shoulder joints, your knee joints, your ankle, can see where everything is. And through doing those 3 squats, just hands overhead and do 3 squats, we're looking at the angle, and we're able to do that effectively from 3D, even though we're using that 2D camera.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay. And then from there, it figures out what imbalances can it see, like all the joints or which ones?
Yeah, it can see a lot. I mean, it's picking up on your nose and ears and elbows, and there it can get a lot. We're just trying to keep it simple, but we're measuring 20 different things. So on the mobility side, we're looking at your shoulder mobility, we're looking at your hip mobility, your knee mobility, your ankle mobility, and how deep you can squat. So we want people to have good mobility, but we also want you to have a good stability. And so we're looking at your scapulas. Are you activating those? We're looking at, a lot of people will squat deeply, but they'll have to lean so far forward, which is not a very stable position. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at if you have what's called a valgus fault. And a valgus fault is when your knees are on the squat are coming inward. That is not a very stable position. You talk about, a lot of ACL injuries. Well, if you have a valgus fault, there's a greater propensity to get ACL. The other two are looking at your posture. So just at the very beginning, are you leaning one way or the other? Just a standing posture. And then the symmetry, which I've mentioned several times, is we're just comparing the mobility left to right on everything that we are measuring on the mobility side: shoulder, knee, hip, and ankle. So getting an awful lot of information in 30 seconds. And there's a heck of a lot more we can get, but that's more than enough, I'd say, for most people.
Yeah, I remember I did posture therapy a bunch of times, like Egoscue and some of the other methods and stuff. And I felt a lot better. It was weird when I did it. I walked around. I felt like I was like huge and muscular, and I walked like a king, like a proud king. It was really weird. So I know it's not even as good as assessment by your system and then training to make sure you're like that, you're symmetrical. But even just that was a big help.
It is. And some people may not like to have a big disagreement, but you hear about posture a lot more than mobility, stability, and symmetry. And I'm not saying it's not important, but with posture, I would just say, just make sure you're not slouching. And if poor posture is going to lead to a lot of the other things that we're measuring, the mobility issues. But yeah, there's a lot of focus on posture. But again, I think that the symmetry, mobility, and stability, if you're looking at more on the preventive injury side and performance, those are the ones I'd be looking at. Posture, just don't slouch.
So what have you noticed? How do you use the device? Do you, when you regularly play a sport, do you do it every time when you first start playing? Do you warm up first and then use it? And then, you adjust your workout plan to keep course correcting towards symmetry, or what do you do?
Yeah, I think that, again, I have my baseline. So I know, let's stay with shoulder. I know what my shoulder mobility is. And if I've gone and done, let's say, a heavy push press day or bench press day or whatever it may be, when I'm going to train the next day or the day after, it's very likely that my shoulder could have been affected and I may not have that flexibility. That is my baseline. And if I don't, I am going to adjust my training for that day. So maybe a better example is the deadlift. Very, very important exercise. And if someone is doing a heavy, heavy deadlift, their ability to move the next day could be compromised. And so whatever you have on your plan, your coach has on your plan for the next day or the day after, if your movement isn't at your baseline, you need to adjust your training. It's the analogy of we have all these other markers for biometrics and the wearable data and the biomarkers like the lipid panel and the vitamin D. And then we have interventions if they're not good. Well, I want to know when my movement is not good and where it should be and what's normal. And then I can do something about it. So if my shoulder flexibility is off 5 degrees before my workout, I will do some strength or some mobility work. Maybe you do some bands, maybe do some rolling on my lats. Then I can quickly retest. Oh, okay. Based on my warm up, I've improved those 5 degrees. So now I'm ready to go. It's just a lot about preparation in order to not put yourself in a compromising position and end up getting, frankly, all the injuries I got on my left side before I started this company.
Yeah, if each time you work out, you're course correcting for this, I can see you have much better and more effective workouts. At what point are you correcting to the point where you don't need to correct anymore? Or it's much more rare. Do you get to that point if you do things properly?
I'd like to say yes, but life happens. Things happen. You had what happened in the pool to affect your knee. So yeah, I mean, ideally, if everything goes perfectly and your workouts are great and you don't accidentally step awkwardly, then sure. But I just think life gets in the way. I'm traveling right now. I'm doing a lot of driving. Was in a plane yesterday. I'll be in a plane tomorrow. And I can guarantee you when I get off that plane, I'm not going to be moving as well. So I will have to do something about it. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to, go out and do my training. So yeah, I just think it's always changing. And that's again why it's important to be able to measure frequently, which means 30 seconds. So it's really easy to measure your sleep and your HRV and your oxygen saturation and your respiratory rate, because you can wake up and your wearable tells you what it is. You can't wake up and figure out what your mobility and symmetry is on Tuesday morning. So
what are the long-term effects that you're hearing from users? After they've been using it a month, let's say, or they used it for like 10 sessions or whatever they do in a row. Like, what kind of feedback you get?
Well, so there's two parts. There's the tool that measures, and then now and we do have some corrective exercise protocols. So here are things to do if you have poor hip mobility. We can give people that, and they can do it, or they're compliant or they're not compliant. Now, the feedback we're getting is that the people that actually are doing it is very effective. But the unanimous feedback everywhere is, I appreciate that I now know what my baseline is, what my biomechanical markers are, because we measure biomechanics, we measure biomarkers, or biometrics, biomarkers, but not biomechanics. Now someone says, you know what? I love the fact that I can get all these markers and I can do it very quickly, and that can affect the way I go about my day, whether it's a workout, lifting in my job in the warehouse, you name it. So I think people are just happy that they have a tool that they can use that's, again, not as simple as waking up and figuring out your movement, but it only takes 30 seconds. And again, whether they're doing the exercises to fix them, some people do and some people don't. But if they don't, they don't blame us for it. They're just happy they have the screen to be able to measure on a daily basis.
Well, who's the end user? Individuals or like physiotherapists? I would think this would be a good tool. Let's say I deal with older folk and they're losing their mobility and I don't want them to fall and break their hip or whatever. I would use it with my clients if that's what I did, and help them get better mobility so that they're in less danger. They can move more freely. Or if I was the coach, for a given sport, or if I was an individual and I wanted to lift heavier, get bigger biceps or whatever, where I row and I want to be able to row further with a lot more comfort. It just seems like there's a lot of different applications. I don't know if in there's certain archetypes of people or institutions that use your tool and how are they using it.
I think you nailed it. It's applicable anywhere. So yeah, in the elderly population, I think the stats are, for somebody that breaks their hip over the age of 70, the being alive in 2 years, the percentages aren't where we want them to be. So what do we do about that? Let's make sure that someone doesn't break their hip. So yeah, it's certainly in the elderly population. Just generically, employers, the number 2 expense for most employers behind labor is healthcare. The number 1 cost on healthcare for claims is musculoskeletal. Again, it's not metabolic. The percentage of Americans that reported a chronic medical condition in the previous year, 31% circulatory, 28% respiratory, 13% diabetic, and 54% musculoskeletal. So you want to reduce healthcare claims? A great place to do that is with musculoskeletal. So very helpful for employers. Then you move more to the high performance athlete that you alluded to. So, pro teams are spending an awful lot of money, and then the numbers of injured players and the salary caps in the hundreds of millions due to injury, absolutely critical there. Then you move to chiros and physical therapists. It's, okay, I have a patient. I know what that patient's baseline is. I need to get that patient back to the baseline after their injury. And so it really is across the board, because, we all need to move. And why we think this is, this sounds simple, but you can't manage movement if you can't measure it. I'm going to stick with your knee. How are you going to manage when you know that you can get back to the activities that you like to do if you can't measure it? So, and take something like, vitamin D, they say the range you want to be between, 30 and I think they say 90, but, ideally in kind of in the 50 to 70 range. Well, no one has any clue about what your vitamin D level is unless you get tested. And then, 70% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. So you can't manage your vitamin D if you can't measure it. And it's the same with all biomarkers, biometrics, and biomechanics. And we believe that movement's the kind of the forgotten component of fitness, and we do believe that movement is a vital sign.
Yeah, definitely. So is it an app you download and pay for, or how do people get access to it?
Yeah, you can just go on App Store, Google Play, and download it. And then for employers, chiros, gyms, then they they contact us, and then they will be able to download it from the Apple Store and give them their credentials for them to work with their clients and members and employees and so forth.
Yeah, well, what's the name of it again?
Yeah, company Physmodo, Physmodo.
Okay, Physmodo. Okay, yeah, I see the almost rainbow P.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll install it. I'll have to check it out right away. That's excellent. Can you put it on a delayed timer, stand it up and run in front of it and then pose? Or does someone else have to do the picture taking of you?
No, so that's kind of coming back to the having to use that front camera to make this effective, so you could see the screen. And the reason that is critical is that we're giving you directions on the screen. So go to your left, go to your right, put your hands down so you can see an avatar on there. Once you're in position, it just guides you to go through those 3 squats. So there's no you don't have to, like 10-second timer, you better be back there. It's, on your own pace.
Is the squat enough to diagnose all the needed joints of the body, or are there other exercises like, I don't know, windmilling your arms in a circle or something? Is this enough? Is it that you minimalized it to this point where this works for everything?
It does not work for everything. So here's the question one has to ask. Do I want to get everything and spend 15 minutes but not be able to screen very often at all? Or do I do the most important and most common movement in any movement screen, the overhead squat, and get about 75 to 80% of what we need? So we're not getting rotation, for instance, but it's a very, very complex movement. It's open chain upper body, closed chain lower body. It's a very difficult movement that is going to pick up a lot of your weaknesses. And in terms of that 15-minute screen, if you are scoring extremely poorly on the overhead squat, then maybe it's worth doing a deeper assessment so you can get everything. So I believe that we can, people look at some of the other movement screen companies and they look at them as competitors, and I don't, because I think we could be almost a feeder into some of these more comprehensive screens. If someone is moving that poorly on the overhead squat, then maybe go do another assessment that's, up to 15 minutes long. But there is research that looks at the overhead squat and says, so the original movement screen was a functional movement screen. It's started in the 90s by Gray Cook and Lee Burton, and they're the pioneers of this industry. And the functional movement screen is a series of 7 movements. And there's research that shows that your score on the overhead squat, which is one of the 7 movements, is predictive of your overall functional movement screen score. So it was, do we do one screen, get 75, 80% of what you want, but be able to do it frequently, or go the other direction? And I think if you look at the cost benefit, this was the way to go.
Yeah, maybe in the future for people that really want to optimize, you could add in like one advanced, motion capture, like you do the overhead squat and then you do this one other one for people that want to make sure that they're maximizing XYZ, and maybe one other different one if it's that, because those not either 30 seconds or 15 minutes, but maybe someone that's really interested and wants to dial in, they'll spend a minute and a half instead of 30 seconds. It's still quick and they get more advantage.
100%. And that's the, the business decision that needs to be made. But yeah, there's probably if there was a second movement, we'd look at what's called the single balance test, because it's getting more information that we're not necessarily getting from the overhead squat. But for now, this success we're having, and it's well received in multiple verticals, and we're just gathering more and more information, and the more and more information that we get and look at. So let's just take you for example. If you had a knee mobility protocol, there's several of them, we could see what actually works for Richard, what works for everybody that's getting the knee pain that you're getting. Ultimately, we're just getting more and more data, and it just becomes extremely valuable just with what we're doing with the overhead squat. So I think from the business side, we want to stick with the one movement and then take that data and be able to effectively have another product. So we'd be able to say, okay, if you have a score below, making this up, a 37 on your left shoulder, the data will show that you have a greater propensity to get injured and have a rotator cuff problem if you're below a 37. So we have so much information now from this one movement. We just want to be able to use that data and provide more and more, get more and more scientific about what works to improve movement.
Okay. Well, it's very cool what you created. Very, very cool. I wonder, I always want to max things out. So I'm imagining like a future version where, a football coach has this watching his players in action. And even though they're running and, throwing and doing all this other stuff, it still can spot what's going on with them. So you can analyze in real time, like all his players and, what they're doing and all that. It'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff out there that does stuff similar. So what we're trying to do is making sure that they're healthy enough so they can go play those sports. But there's some great technology out there. And it's amazing when you're just watching a sporting event, the things that, one contracts, just the Super Bowl coming up, and we're able to track, this person on their punt return got up to 21.2 miles an hour, and it's just fascinating what can be measured. And we like the approach that we're taking, and we like the fact that it's effective in anything from sports to senior living to employers to youth sports. And, we like the fact we get to work in all those different demographics and verticals.
Yeah. I was just picturing, golf. That might be the most amenable to what you're doing, as an advanced version, because it's a similar motion each time. So you can see like imbalances and all that. But
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I was at the PGA show 2 weeks ago. And it's amazing. There are 100,000 teaching pros in the U.S. and 4 million people that take private golf lessons a year, and they'll do anything to increase their yardage by 10 yards off the tee, and a lot of it is hip. So with the exact discussions we were having a couple of weeks ago. So it's funny you mentioned that, but you nailed it.
I know. I'm putting my wishes on you. I want you to use it for all these sports and make millions and millions, and you become the new standard for all these teams. Like without your stuff, they're just not competitive anymore because you're taking things to a new level. So it's just what was going on in my head. That's all.
No, I appreciate it. We're having fun and we're doing some good stuff.
Well, excellent. All right. So Physmodo, I encourage everyone listening, download the app, and I'm going to assess myself and see and check this out. But this will be very cool. And thanks for making this, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, Richard, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Excellent.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.